Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Health Endowment. My name is Lori Seibel and I'm the President and CEO of the Community Health Endowment. We're really pleased to have so many of you here today to hear about my life story. I returned from war. When we were thinking about a series, this is our second community conversation series, one of the things that was really close to our heart was the idea of hearing real stories, real life stories from folks who have done really extraordinary things in their lives, but who have a story to tell, and especially how that story intersected with our health and human services community or our safety net services. And so we're kicking it off today with this extraordinary panel of folks who've represented our country so well in recent combat zones. So thank you all, first of all, for being here. So now on to today's event. Veterans issues, of course, have been in the news much lately, but of course we're often hearing from governmental officials and people who have a particular opinion about that. But what we want to do today is we want to hear specifically from the veterans of our nation's most recent wars. Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation New Dawn. We know that the challenges that these veterans face in reintegration are very specific, not only to them, but to the veterans who have fought for our country before. So it's important to hear directly from them, and that's what we'll be doing today. So on our panel today, we have Rick Carter, who is a Army veteran, Chris Stokes, who is an Air Force veteran, and Ryan Kaufman, who's also an Army veteran, and they'll be telling their stories. And I'm going to introduce Rick quickly to you. I think I'm introducing you all. I'm going to introduce you all. Okay. Rick is the Executive Director of the Human Services Federation. Many of you know Rick, and he has a long service to this community. But the Human Services Federation, who's our partner today in this event, is a federation of over 130 nonprofits. He served in the Nebraska Army National Guard for more than 24 years, and he returned in May of 2012 after a year-long deployment to Afghanistan. He has a Master's of Science degree in Leadership Education from the University of Nebraska and has been involved with many, many things, especially in the areas of community change. He's been awarded numerous Army Achievement Commendation Medals, including the Air Medal, the Combat Action Badge, and the Master Air Crew Member Wings. He has flown more than 500 combat hours as a flight engineer aboard the CH-47 Chinook helicopter. Welcome him, please.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Chris Stokes began his career in 1988 as an enlisted operations specialist in the Nebraska Air National Guard. He was assigned to fly the F-16 Fighting Falcon and was the distinguished graduate of his training class. He was deployed to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield over Iraq. He also flew anti-drug missions off of the coast of Colombia and Homeland Defense mission in support of Operation Noble Eagle. In 2004, he transitioned to the A-10C Thunderbolt II based out of Whiteman, Missouri. In 2006, he was deployed to Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, and flew combat missions supporting ground troops, as well as acted as liaison officer in the Combined Air Operations Center in Qatar. Chris is a graduate of UNL and holds a master's in leadership from Bellevue University. And last but not least, Ryan Kaufman is a native of Omaha who signed up for the Army in 1999. He was stationed at Fort Riley with the Big Red One, mechanized infantry. He served in the Army from 2000 to 2003, including service in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He was released with the general under honorable discharge due to behavior and conduct, something he says he wishes that he could take back. Ryan faced chronic homelessness following his discharge and has had 36 jobs in 10 years. He and his wife Emily have been separated 3 times due to reintegration issues. Ryan now works as a peer specialist for Lutheran Family Services at their At Ease program and says he works with a great team. He is studying organizational communication for nonprofits, and he and his wife Emily, who are over here, will have a baby either tonight or tomorrow. So, welcome them. And her name will be Eden. Is that right? Yes. So we're looking forward to hearing about that. Rick, thank you for being here. Here you go.
I think we're good. I just want to start out, thank you, Lori, and thank you to Community Health Endowment for allowing us to be here today, and thank you to each and every one of you taking time out of your day to come here and talk with us. And thank you to my brothers who are sitting at the table here. Chris, I don't know whether, when I see you in uniform, I don't know if I should call you Colonel or Sir or Chris. So you might get a mix of all three today. And Ryan, we're hoping the baby comes tonight and not today, but just in case. Thankfully, Kim Russell's here and the hospital's not far. So we can make that work if necessary, I think, is kind of what we're shooting for. You know, I was really excited, and we're going to go around and here at the beginning kind of share a little bit, each of us a little bit of time. But I think it's really important to kind of start this out. You know, kind of what brought this about was Community Health Endowment and their work and the work of a lot of organizations here in Lincoln and throughout Nebraska, really trying to help kind of wrap their hands around the idea of veterans transition home from war. And you know, it's an important issue for all of us to be talking about. We know that right now we're returning, you know, 1.6 million veterans returning home from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they face real issues. For example, in the next 65 minutes, the time that we're sitting here today, one veteran in the United States will commit suicide, and that will happen as we sit here and share this. And one of the things that we know about the 25 veterans a day that commit suicide in this country is that over half of them are over the age of 50. And I think what's important to remember about that is, in honor to the service and sacrifices of previous generations of veterans, Vietnam veterans and Korean War veterans and World War II veterans, we never figured out transition home for them either. And they struggle with the same things today that you'll hear us talk about a little bit. And it's really about how do we bring a community together to acknowledge and talk about, one, how to improve as a community and how to reach out and share with each other in a way that's productive and helpful. So again, thank you each for being here, and thank you to my brothers on the panel for taking time to do this today. And we're just going to start, Ryan, we're going to start with you, and we're going to spend just a few minutes and allow you to kind of hear a little bit of the story of our individual experiences, both on deployment, just to give you a little bit of background about what each of us may have experienced.
First of all, like Rick, I want to thank the Lincoln Community Health Endowment. I'd like to thank Rick for asking me to show up today, and I'd like to thank my wife for holding that baby off for another 4 hours. It's on the way to the hospital, so. You know, like my introduction stated, I signed up in 1999, and I was a genius. In other words, I had the innate ability to make the exact wrong decision at the right moment. And my mom was a single mother of 4. Before I turned 17 or 18, we had over 70 addresses in Omaha, and I had screwed around and missed my ACT and SAT. And my mom said, "Come May, you can't live here." You know, and sitting in the living room, she signed the papers so I can go to the U.S. Army in 2000, and then that was in 1999, and there was no war. You know, it was a great time in this country. You know, people could make a really good living, and didn't really need a lot to do with. And the gas was 99 cents. And I went, and I'll never forget in basic training the attack in Yemen on a ship, and our drill sergeants looked at us and they said, you know, sooner or later you're going to go to war. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know, it's been 20 years, we're good, you know. And sure enough, I hit Fort Riley April of 2001, and by September I was turning 19 on the border of Iraq, you know, and they were asking for volunteers to go to Afghanistan. You know, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy doesn't fit in Kabul, and I'm not supposed to be recognized. And You know, you do what needs to be done without asking questions. And I came home and I was a maniac. I had $12,000 in my bank account at 19 years old, and my mom now has stage 5 cancer, and the United States Army really doesn't care about that. And the military is a whole lot different. It's evolved in the last decade, from what I understand. But I don't have a ring or a car or a house or a marriage to show for that $12,000. I have a recovery from a methamphetamine and alcohol habit. You know, can't sleep at night. I'm hanging out with rebels without a clue, back home on leave, and they're doing something very illegal, and I shouldn't even be in there. And I ask them if it's going to keep me awake, and they say yes. And I pull $400 out of my pocket, and I stay up for the next 4 days. And I think it's great, because now I don't have to worry about what's ticking in the dark. I can rearrange my cupboards at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I went back to post with this. I went back to Fort Riley with this new habit. And we go on deployment, on our second deployment, and I'm getting ready to go, and I get a DUI. And all of my battle buddies are leaving. I'm a single soldier. Everybody I love and know sleeps in the barracks with me, and they're leaving, and my first sergeant says, "You can't go. You can't go fight with your brothers. The Army no longer has a use for you. And by the way, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to end up dead or in jail. So here's a half hour of substance abuse counseling, and here's 4 hours of civilian transition." And you know, July 3rd of 2003, my Independence Day, I got a knock on the door, and it was one of my first sergeant's minions. And I went down to the first sergeant's office, and he says, "Ryan, you have until noon to get off my post." And I decided to go to Rosenblatt Stadium that night, and that wasn't a good idea. Those are a couple of things I didn't really know. I was a commo guy in a mechanized infantry division that hopped up and down off of tanks, and I was told I was going to do computers when I went in there. I saw maybe one laptop while I was deployed, and it was to send an email home to the woman I supposedly loved, who, by the way, 2 months into it, decided that this wasn't working out, and that's okay. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I got assigned to the Scouts, and that meant I did forward battle tracking, and I was out there all alone, it seemed like, with 8 Humvees and Strykers, and you go, you know, I don't know if this is going to work out. You know, you're moving north, and you're waiting for a brigade of mechanized infantry to come through, tanks and MLRS and all that stuff, and you find yourself with a handful of 20, 25 soldiers, and then you see a battalion of M1 Abrams, and you go, we're going to be all right, you know. And you do that every 2 hours, you know, for 48 hours. And then you're just expected to take an 8-hour nap and get up and do it all over again. And it was awesome. I loved it, you know. I miss it. I miss it more days than I don't. So with that, I'll pass it to Chris.
Thanks. My name's Chris Stokes. I have a much different story than Ryan here. I grew up in a military family, and ever since I was a little kid, I built models, I read books. All I wanted to do was be a fighter pilot my whole life. My dad, and follow my dad's footsteps. So everything I did was geared towards that. Even decisions I made when I was 14 and 15, whether or not to smoke pot or not smoke pot, I was like, nope, I'm going to be a pilot, military, I can't do that. So it really helped me get through my whole childhood to make this goal of being a pilot. And I went to UNL and all that stuff. Yeah, I think she read my bio there. But so I finally got my dream of being an F-16 pilot, which back in the 90s was a really awesome airplane. It still is, but there's better ones now. And and I got my dream. For 10 years, I flew this airplane. I loved it. It was great experience. I was doing everything that I always wanted to do, including a number of deployments to do some flying over Iraq and so forth. but generally no true combat. I mean, we would get lit up by enemy radars and so forth, but generally it was, you weren't thinking you were going to die or anything. So did that, and then I switched over to the A-10 a little bit later in my career. This is 03 or 4 or so, and I flew that for about 4 years out of Missouri as a reservist. Meanwhile, I'm an airline pilot and living a life, kids, wife, all that stuff, and fly for United Airlines. So then we get the nod to deploy to Afghanistan. So that's a big deal because it's a real war there, and not that Iraq. When I was in Iraq, it was before the big war. We were just doing the no-fly zones and such, so there wasn't too much combat going on. So this is the real deal. So of course, this is great for me. I'm a 35-year-old guy. I'm a major. Been training my whole life for this, and this is the real deal. This is go time. And so fortunately, Air Force deployments are only 3 or 4 months long, as opposed to these poor saps who have to go for 12+ months. But, and I say that with love.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
My cousin told me
these guys
about
could kill
Air
me
Force.
with one now. But yeah, they make fun of Air Force guys for that stuff. But anyway, so my experience is way different than these guys and most people's, and that's a big point I want to bring up, that everybody's different. Everybody has the ability to process things differently, and everybody has different experiences. So anyway, so I did a 3+ month stint in Afghanistan, and for the Air Force, which again, Army guys are just love to make fun of us. We have air condition, we have phones and computers, and life is not too bad. But the hard part of my job and the stress that I face, and what led to maybe my issues was the intense pressure that was put on us daily for that period of time. And so there's no days off. There's no Christmas. I mean, there's sort of Christmas. They make it at the Chow Hall. They make it something, whatever. That's about all the difference of every day is. It's Groundhog Day. We always said that. It's totally overused, but it's really true if you don't understand if you've ever seen that movie. Over and over and over. And so every day we would have a 4-hour sortie in the A-10, which I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but it's a fighter jet, and it has a big gun on it. And we are the ones that communicate with the ground guys who are getting shot up. And then we go over, fly to them, and then blow up the bad guys. So that was my job every day for 4 hours. And sometimes you would, and sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes you'd fly around in circles and not do anything, and come back and come home and go to the Chow Hall and go to the gym and work out and repeat Groundhog Day over and over for 90 days or 90+ days. So that was the stress in those 4-hour periods of day in and day out. You get one day off, but no one even wants to have a day off because what are you going to do? You sit there? I mean, there's nothing to do except go to the gym or go to the Chow Hall, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't even want days off. You want to keep doing what you're doing. So that was my experience, and it was a very intense time for me. So.
Thanks, Chris. I think one of the benefits that you're going to have is there's really different stories that you're hearing today. And I think Chris makes a really good point, is that, these are our stories, and, I don't think any of us would say that this is the experience of every veteran. But they're right. These are real, and they're true, and they're personal. And, for me, I joined the Army National Guard in high school. I started going to drill while I was a senior at Lincoln Northeast High School, and I graduated in May of 1990, and in June of 1990 I was at basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And by the time I got to Fort Rucker, Alabama for my next training, Saddam Hussein was rolling tanks into Kuwait, and we all thought, holy cow, what happened here? Things just got really real. And then I came back to my unit, and some units from Nebraska deployed to Iraq, and I didn't. And honestly, there was feelings of, did I just miss did I miss what I was supposed to do by not going? And I thought, all right, I'll get over it. I'm 20 years old. There's not a, it's okay. It's okay to do this. And I carried on my military career, and I joined the National Guard for the college benefits. I mean, let's be honest. I went because that was how I could afford to go to college. And I did. And I used them a lot because it took me a really long time to get through college. I should be like a 3-time doctor for as long as it took me to get through college. But I kept using those benefits. And I loved the men and women that I served with. And I loved them dearly. And I reached my 20-year mark in the military, and I decided to myself that's when I was going to retire. And right at the time I was hitting my 20-year mark, my unit got notification that they were going to Afghanistan. And I did a lot of soul searching at that moment, and I said, I'm not going. I'm going to follow through and retire. And so I actually retired from the Army National Guard at 20 years. And retirement didn't sit well with me. And you think it's hard to get, well, anymore it's not as hard to get in the military, but it's really hard when you're a 39-year-old with 20 years of service to get back in. And I fought, and I got back in. And I got back in to deploy with the men and women that I served with. And it wasn't for any like want to go. It was for the idea that I couldn't let them go without me. I had to go with them. That was where I was supposed to be. And I knew it, and there was no doubt about it in my mind. And I got back in, and I battled along. And we got to Afghanistan, so our unit mobilized in May of 2011, and we fly Chinook helicopters, which are the great big helicopters. We're the flying truck of the Army, and we would do it all, and that was our job. And I loved it. I loved flying because as a flight engineer, it's like sitting on a tailgate of a pickup, except I got to sit on the tailgate of a Chinook at anywhere from 50 to 15,000 feet every single day. And I loved it. And then for me, that all changed because in August of 2011, we lost a crew. A Chinook got shot down, and we'd been in country only about 3 weeks. And one of my best friends in the world was on that aircraft. And all of a sudden, things got really real. Up until that point, I don't think I realized that there were people out there who were set and intent on killing us. And that's when it set in. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? And it's also the moment that I realized this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, because this is why I'm here, was to be here with my brothers and sisters in this moment. And so we flew out of southern Afghanistan. I flew primarily out of Kandahar. And Chris is right. I don't know what Christmas was that year because I flew on Christmas and I flew on Thanksgiving. And you name the holiday, I flew on it. I'd get up in the morning on Christmas morning because it was Christmas Eve back home. And I got the opportunity to Skype with my kids for a little while on their Christmas Eve. And then I strapped it on and I climbed on a helicopter and I flew all day. And
it's almost more depressing.
It's worse. It's worse. And that's just it. And we did that. And I think I learned the experience there. I think as I relate it back to what we all tell in our personal stories is that I think the biggest takeaway I had in those moments is that it was all about how we each individually took in what was happening around us. And I don't think I'd ever realized how much baggage I took with me to Afghanistan, in here and inside, and I never thought about it. I'd been really good at putting things in boxes my whole life and tucking them away, and all of a sudden I was in a place that I couldn't put stuff in boxes anymore. There was too much stress, there was too much going on, and all of the boxes opened up, and it was hard. And there were days I didn't know how I was gonna either walk on that aircraft or days I didn't know if I was gonna walk back off of it at the end of the day. And I think that for me it was the hardest thing that I'd ever done to that point. Okay. Deep breaths. We're all right. And I think that's the thing, is that it feels better being able to share right now. And I think, Ryan, we talked about it a little bit before this, is the importance of feeling safe and sharing those stories. And I think, again, that's why we appreciate you all here, is that, there is this bubble of safety in allowing us to share a little bit with you. And I think what you're hearing are people trusting in that idea that it's okay to be vulnerable in front of a group and to tell these stories, because they're important stories.
Yahtzee.
That's it.
Yahtzee.
So I think one of the things is we're going to go back to Ryan and have him talk a little bit about some of those challenges and experiences. You've heard now a little bit of what happened to us there and what we did. And I think it's important to maybe spend a few minutes each talking about what were those experiences, what was coming home, the point of today, and what was coming home and that experience of coming home. So Ryan.
So as you guys heard in my introduction, I've had quite the career and quite a few addresses. And Rick said something about boxes. And usually when I'm on this panel or panels like this, I do this veteran disclaimer. The experiences shared here by this veteran are of this veteran and should not be applied to all veterans. Because sometimes, we'll be having family dinner, or we'll be out at a restaurant and somebody will see me and, hey Ryan, I know what you do. I have this, my cousin Mike who's having issues. What do I do? I don't know. I don't know. Try screaming at him. That's what worked for me. I got out. I mean, that's literally what somebody got in my face, and it took 10 years for somebody to get in my face. I got out, and my mother passed away within 6 months of cancer. And I'm 20 years old, and my brother's 17, my other brother's 15 or 14, and my sister's 12. And I don't know what to do. And they went their way and I went my way. Working at a pizza shop for $8 an hour is really awesome to say on a Friday night to a neighborhood girl who's hungry, but it doesn't pay the bills. And I ended up down at the Siena Francis house, and I was there for 3 days. And my buddy came down and he said, Ryan, you don't have to live like this, man. We really appreciate what you've done. Why don't you come stay on our couch? And I thought, that's a really good idea. He said, well, first of all, you have to stop doing speed. And I said, that's a great idea. I've been looking for a reason to quit. That's a joke. Some of the jokes I make are I find hilarious, but I find that civilians don't really think it's funny. And the Army never taught me how to budget. The Army never taught me how to look over a lease. The Army never taught me how to go grocery shopping. That stuff was provided for me. I had housing. I had the barracks. I had this card that, the Columbus, Georgia Bank and Trust, that they brought somebody in at Fort Benning, and I signed up for a bank account because I didn't have one, and the government said, I need a place to put your money, Ryan. I said, okay, put it in here. And I just swiped my card, and when I was out of money, I was out of money. Nobody told me that, the 1st through the 5th, you need to pay your rent. Nobody told me on the 10th, the gas is due. On the 15th, your phone bill is due. I didn't learn those things, and my buddy and his parents took me in and they taught me those things. And we started a savings account, and they took me out to go get a job, and they helped me get released from the state probation office, which is really hard to freaking do without doing a little bit of time in county. And I got my own apartment, and my buddy moved in, and that didn't last very long because I'm a maniac. I'm still doing tons of things because I still got all this stuff in these boxes, and they want to come out, and the only thing I know how to do is drown them in alcohol. And now I have an appendectomy, and now I find pain pills are awesome on top of that. And they're not. They're not. I didn't lose the apartment. I know where it is. They just told me I couldn't live there anymore. And I ended up on another buddy's couch. And I ended up at another job. And now I'm a full-blown drug addict and alcoholic. And my buddy gets me a job at Bergen Mercy in the basement of doing all things printing prescription pads. And the only thing that, I can't make this up, man, I really can't. The only thing that stopped me from doing that was right across from the print shop at Bergen Mercy is the morgue. And I'd see guys wheeled in. And my mom died on the bathroom floor of a hospital, and I didn't want to do that. And he took me out, and we went to a tavern on a Friday night, and it happened. All of a sudden, I need to know where all the exits are. And I got to find the biggest guy in the room and make a scene so everybody just leaves me alone and knows that I'm not to be messed with. And I start walking on tables. And I'm 6'3". And the tavern we're at is 4 feet tall with the booths, And so now I'm 10.5 feet tall, literally. And I'm the type of guy that's got to get loaded to go get loaded, so I'm already pretty out there. And I get on the third table, and this lady looks up at me, this good-looking gal, and she says, "Hi," and I said, "Hello." And she said, "Why don't you sit down, you idiot?" And I said, "Okay," And we started talking about serving others. And I told her this sob story about my childhood in the Army, and I just really wanted something warm to go home to, and it seemed to be working. And she gave me her number, and she said, "Give me a call tomorrow. There's some kids in my school that you could really benefit." Not realizing that I couldn't stay sober long enough for the kids to get out of school for me to talk to, I called her 6 times the next day, and she didn't answer. We're married today. And she's been through hell and back. I started talking about my issues in 2008 with her. We were watching a really stupid episode of a really not so veteran friendly HBO series, and I made it a half hour through it, and it happened again. And I find myself on her stoop with a glass of whiskey, and I can't talk and I can't move, and all I'm doing is crying, and she wants to know why, and I can't tell her why. I don't want my voice telling her what's wrong with this world. And so a battle buddy of mine shows up in Omaha, and he takes me to the VA, and I about try and crawl out of the window, and he walked me into the VA, and he said, "Ryan, you're going to go in here and you're going to go talk to some people." And I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah, I'll be here waiting." I said, "They're not going to let me out." And he goes, "That's okay. That's kind of why I brought you here." And they let me out, but they gave me a prescription. And I didn't listen to anything the doctor said. Quit drinking, get a little exercise, do some of these things. I just took the prescription and walked out. And 2 months after me and Emily were married, I tried to swallow the whole bottle of pills. And she literally saved my life. And so it's been a decade, Chris and Rick, and once we start talking about it, I really need that safety. I really need somebody there. My challenge was I didn't know who to go to or who I could tell this to. I'm active duty. My base is 200 miles away, and they're not letting me on post. And that was hard.
Well, I guess I'll pick up from here. To finish off my story from where I was before, it was, again, this is different experience, new guy, new day here, but this intense pressure that I would face every day, it started to really wear on me. And see what happens when you're flying this airplane is you're low and you're talking to the Army guys. So what they do is they have 4-hour blocks throughout the day of where 2 airplanes would go up and fly in a circle and go hit the tanker, just like we have out here at the airport. We'd go fly with the tanker, and we'd wait on the radio for something to happen, which usually, somewhere in that pretty large country, someone's getting shot, something's going down. So we'd either on the way to the tanker or while we're sitting on the tanker, or maybe we'd have a backup mission, we'd get called. Hey, someone go to these coordinates. You never have any information. The radios were horrible, but we could usually figure out where to go and the frequency to contact the ground guys on. And so point is that even though it's kind of weird, and I have a little bit of guilt about this because, again, I had air-conditioned quarters, nice food, nice gym. I'm in an air-conditioned cockpit, and where these guys are really sweating it out, and they've been there for 11 months, and their buddies have been covered with blood. And, I mean, they have the real war stories, where I don't necessarily have that. But so my experience was this intense pressure of life or death decisions that happen every day. So it's really this feeling of being alive that these guys will mention, and almost any soldier will mention if you ask them about their experiences, and this huge responsibility. Now, I'm a little more mature. I'm 5 years old, and 22-year-olds have a different brain than 35-year-olds, and that's why insurance gets cheaper at age 25 and all that stuff. So to younger guys, a lot of time they're all gung-ho about it, where maybe when you're a little bit older, again, everybody's different. My experience is a little older. This real heavy weight was on my shoulders every day, this responsibility, because you're always within I can't explain it, but just because we're up high, we're 15,000 feet, and you look through your sights and stuff. But on the ground, it's this much, just a quarter inch is the difference between killing a bunch of Canadians on the other side of a river or a creek, whatever it is, or the bad guys. And so even though we talk ad nauseum and we try to figure out who's where, and there's smoke and there's all kinds of different ways to not blow up your friends or blow up fratricide, that pressure was always there. And we had a guy in our squadron that killed a bunch of Canadians, and it's really, really, really bad to do that. And we had guys that we killed tons of Afghani ANAs by accident. Thank goodness I didn't. I'd be a mess. Probably wouldn't be here. But anyway, so there's that pressure. I'm trying to explain it to you guys so you understand where I'm coming from. So, and gosh, one button push, and you can be a hero, medals on your chest, save the day, Stokes is awesome, woohoo! Or you're, oh my God, you kill all these people and you're the biggest jerk ever, and rip off your wings and you're out of here, buddy. The military is a very unforgiving organization. And they don't like mistakes at all, even dumb little mistakes or large mistakes. And that is magnified big time in a war zone. So my big fear, and this pressure that I speak about, was not screwing up. And anyway, I'm just trying to give you I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's probably what affected me the most day in and day out from I don't want to say PTSD, but just from a mental aspect. That responsibility of in killing people. I mean, I've killed people. Ugh. I'm a Christian. I love my brother, love my neighbor, and all this stuff. It's a dark and yucky, evil place, and I felt that the minute I got off the airplane, and it didn't go away till I left. And it's hard to try to function in that environment. So coming back, that's what we're supposed to be talking about. I didn't have I was only there for a short time. I think PTSD and all the effects of that and mental issues has a lot to do with, again, the age thing. I think younger guys have a lot harder time with it sometimes. And then also the time that you're there and faced with that pressure. So it's that, for me, it was the pressure. A lot of guys, it's adrenaline. When I don't know, I wish I had a whiteboard or something, but your normal adrenaline levels here, and maybe, you know, driving down the street, oh, whoa, almost got in an accident, but spikes up a little bit. But there, your normal adrenaline levels here, and every time you're going out in a convoy to deliver mail or drop off bullets or whatever it is, or going out flying, that adrenaline level is up there. And so you do that for some period of time, whether it's 4 months or 12 months, and with that higher adrenaline level, your body, I think, I'm getting into your guys' realm. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but it seems to me like your body gets used to that. And it's hard to come down from that. Fortunately for me, I was only there for 3 months, 3+ months, and it wasn't, I didn't have that many signs. I mean, my wife's here, and one time I was irritable. I couldn't tolerate stupid stuff, which it's easy to say, but
God, I hate the Kardashians.
What qualifies as drama? What qualifies as drama here in this world is nothing like every day over there, and so, like, you know, decisions on draperies. I'm like, what? What? Who cares? Are people dying? You know, so that would be kind of my mentality. You know, I had bad dreams. I still have dreams occasionally. I can't sleep very well, but that's normal. I mean, sometimes I don't know if accountants over in the Wells Fargo building have the same issues that I do or not. But anyway, so that was my experience. Coming back, I did go through to the VA and talk to them, and it was an interesting conversation. They said, yeah, you'd probably qualify, but if you want to keep flying in the airlines, you know, that it's probably not a good idea to keep running with this. And I said, okay, well, yeah, you know what, I feel better all of a sudden. So that was a little weird. But yeah, that's been my experiences coming home, Rick. So.
No, and thanks. And I think that's it. I mean, Chris hits on that adrenaline rush, and it's what I felt. There was nothing better than sitting on the ramp of a Chinook at 50 feet and 200 miles an hour, zipping through valleys and popping up over hills. And, you know, it's that split-second piece. He's right, is that, you know, you'd come into a landing zone, and whether you were doing it under night vision goggles in the black of night or in full daylight, and there's farmers in fields, and is he picking up a hoe, or is he picking up an RPG as you fly over the top of him? And there's split-second pieces where and it's a rush, and it's an addictive rush. And I think for me, when I talk about the boxes, for me is that the only way that, and I did it when I first came home, is that I couldn't find enough ways to serve others while I was there, because it's the one thing I knew how to do. It was the one thing that I was good at when I left here, is I came from the nonprofit world. And I mean, one of my mentors is in the room, Beatty Brash. And Beatty taught me how to take care of other people really, really well. And that's how I knew I could do that. And so when I was there, I took care of my fellow soldiers. And my family contributed to a project. It became the Dado Project, where we distributed coats and gloves to children in Afghanistan, because it's the one thing that I knew that I could do, is that I could serve. And I could put all of my crap away, and I could just focus on doing what I knew best, and that was serving other people. And I came home, and years ago, I used to work for Senator Bob Kerrey. And I came home just in time for Bob to be rerunning for his Senate seat in Nebraska. And I got home and I got a phone call from him. And he said, come up to Omaha. So I headed up to Omaha, and I thought, here's my big job offer that I'm going to get from the Kerry campaign, and this is going to be great. And he sat me down in his office, and he goes, you want to come work on the campaign? And I said, yeah. And he goes, have they been calling you about coming here for a job? I said, yeah. And he goes, you're not allowed. And I said, what? And he goes, you can't come work here. And I said, why not? And he goes, Rick, you're messed up. He goes, go home and be. And I said, why? I have no idea what that means. And he goes, exactly. He goes, go home and figure it out. And he sent me home. And all of a sudden I was at home and I didn't have this adrenaline rush anymore. And I didn't know what to do. I had to get the rush from something. And was the rush, could I get it from, there's nothing here that felt like that. And the worst thing that they did to me is they told me, you can't go back to work. You know, you got 2 months, you got to just sit, you know, and the Army's going to pay you. You can't go back to your regular job yet. So just hang out. And I'm like, I can't just hang out. So here I was, you know, 2 weeks before this, I was flying missions in Afghanistan, and suddenly I'm sitting on my front porch watching my kids play, and I was like, this ain't working. And what could I do to fuel my own adrenaline? And what were the peace? So I took part in pretty risky behavior. And I made mistakes. And I got a phone call after Labor Day. Bob called me back up, and he goes, did you figure out how to be? And I said, no. And he goes, well, let's go drive. And so I spent the rest of that campaign hanging out in a car with Senator Kerry. And I think one of the most important moments for me is that he turned to me one time driving, and he's been quoted on this before, but he turned to me and he goes, Rick Carter. And I said, yes, Senator. And he said, you're never defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And all of a sudden that started to click for me. And I thought, he's right. The worst thing I've ever done doesn't define who I am today. And that was the moment that I figured out how to start being. And I didn't need the VA, and I didn't need more prescriptions from the VA. What I needed to do was start putting those away and be done with what I was getting from that, the dulling of it all. You know, I don't know if you've ever taken sleep pills, but, you know, I woke up dry nasal passages every day, and my head hurt, and I felt like I had a cold, and I was like, I can't do this. And the only way I can do it is if I can figure out how to just be and start again. And that was the hardest part, was then convincing people around me that it was okay for me to be just how I was, and that it was going to be a process for me, and a long process that still goes on today. And I think that probably leads us into the question of, you know, I think you've kind of heard us each round robin a little bit, and I think kind of for a little while, I want to spend some time just going back and forth a little bit with some questions for us, and kind of at the end we'll open it up to you all. But just to talk about, what do you wish the community or that people knew when you came home, or what would be helpful, and what did you know coming home when you came back into the community, or what do you wish you would know? And does anybody want to start?
Yeah. I didn't know Jack, and I still don't know Jack. I just know people who know things, and when I came home, I didn't know those people. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen the Omaha VA on 40th and Center, but it is very dark. It looks like a freaking mental health hospital. You know, it really looks like an asylum. And I saw that place and I went, no, I'm not going in there. And then when I went, actually, I literally doctor shopped for about 6 months until I got shoved in there by my buddy. But when I went in there, nobody looked like me. You know, there were old white men in wheelchairs. That's all I saw. That's all I chose to see. You know, and it wasn't until I actually sat down and got to know one of those guys, you know, got to know World War II veterans and Korean War veterans and Vietnam War veterans, that I realized that the places on the map and the terrain may have been different, but the soldiers the same. You know, whether it's Kandahar, you know, or Ho Chi Minh, or Berlin, you know, or Seoul. Those guys, they were into, you know, 82, 85, 91-year-old men were into exactly what I was into. And it was literally like sitting at the barracks just having a conversation with a buddy. And we didn't have to talk about over there. We could talk about here. And they just knew, and I just knew. I wish there was a place that didn't want my money for people to belly up to a bar and tell war stories that I could walk into. I wish there was just a place I could walk into and I'm home. And there you are, sitting there, telling me, get out your boxes and let's talk.
A big thing for me coming back and what I saw, it was a change. I lost my train of thought, but it's so like passe to say, oh, no one understands, but for me, when you go over and do something, we're imperfect human beings, and we make mistakes, right? So we accidentally shoot the farmer instead of the bad guy or whatever that is. Well, because we're human and human nature, and because maybe a lot of other factors, the adrenaline, the thing I mentioned about no tolerance for failure mentality in the military, and certainly in a wartime situation when you're protecting your buddies and all that stuff. People tend to focus on that one mistake they made in January instead of the other 11 months of all the great things they did. And that can define them. And I wanted to jump on what Rick said about, I think a big tendency, at least this happened to me, I know it did, and I'm sure other guys, they'll pick out one situation or maybe one couple situations that didn't go so well, and maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they crashed the Humvee and whatever, fill in the blank of mistake or screw up. And sometimes they're not even screw ups, it's just what I think is a screw up. And they focus on that, and it begins to define them and their whole experience there, and then they spiral downward mentally from that. I have a perfect example. We were flying over a valley, I'll never forget it, north-south valley, and there were some Humvees it was early in the morning, the sun just came up, and they knew they were going to get attacked by intelligence. They were listening to cell phones and such, so they were calling us and saying, get over here, we're going to get attacked. There's all kinds of chatter. And so sure enough, we fly over to where they are, which wasn't far from the tanker. In fact, we could see the tanker from where we were, which is not normal. And sorry, I'm telling war stories, but so anyway, we're watching this all unfold. We're watching these two pickup trucks full of guys at 5 in the morning driving towards our guys. I mean, we were too high to see if they had guns. We couldn't see that well, but this is not good. I'm watching this play out, and it's all, I'm looking down at my plane, and this is all, like, the good guys are here and the bad guys are here, and there's the road and the dust and such. Well, anyway, one of the big no-nos in being a fighter pilot is ever to shoot without getting clearance from the ground. And long story longer, I saw what was unfolding. I knew there was no chance of the good guys getting blown up if I went in and shot. And so I rolled in and shot the bad guys, but I didn't get my clearance. I didn't get that, and I forgot. It wasn't because I consciously said, I'm going to do this anyway. I was so caught up in the moment, adrenaline, whatever you want to call it. I knew the good guys were here, bad guys are here, they're coming, I'm going to go do this. And but anyway, I got hammered by my flight lead. I was his number 2 guy, and he's like, you fired without clearance. I'm like, oh, jeez, oh my gosh. Huge no-no, big no-no. But really, looking back, I'm like, that was the right thing to do. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I let that really, really get to me big time. Even now, it makes me cringe to think about it. So isn't that weird? I mean, I let that odd thing, I don't want to say define me, but I really let that get to me. And so when I think back of my experience, that's one of the big things in my mind. Well, that one time I shot without clearance. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
I think it makes sense. And I think it's one of the challenges that, when I came home, I think one of the things that's different about Lincoln and Nebraska as a community is so many of our veterans that return home are Guard and reservists. I mean, they left from jobs and they returned to jobs, and they left from communities that, I have guys in my unit that are from Broken Bow and that are from Thedford, and what are the resources in Thedford when the nightmares come at night? I mean, what are you doing? And they're alone out there, and it's tough to figure out. I hated being back in my social circle, hated it. And Chris hit it exactly right. The worst discussion in the world was to talk to me about the bad dinner you had at such and such restaurant. I was like, are you kidding me? I used to eat for lunch. And I don't know who the contractor was. Well, I do know, but they got a lot of money to provide me with a piece of onion and a piece of cheese on 2 pieces of white bread for my lunch every single day. I mean, that's what I got in a little bag when I went to go fly. Sometimes some macaroni salad. But I kid you not, onion sandwiches. We joke about it in my unit all the time. But to hear about that dinner and to sit there and go, really? That's what you're going to complain about today? I couldn't do it. And I think that for me, I was so ready to kind of blame others and say, well, you just don't get it. You just don't get it. That my next step for me was I was around this idea of, well, how do I seek forgiveness for the things that I've done? And I tried it. I went to my church and I sat down and I said, all right, what do you got? Show me forgiveness. And nothing happened. And I thought, well, son of a gun, there's no forgiveness here either. And I think it's taken me until real recently to figure out that the whole idea was how to forgive myself. And the minute I started forgiving myself for the crap that I did, my life started to change. And I thought, nobody told me this idea of self-forgiveness. Where'd I miss it? And and I'm not trying to make a comparison here, but Ryan talks about it a little bit with addiction and recovery. If I enter a recovery program for an addiction, at a month or at 6 months or at a year, I get a coin and I get some recognition for what I'm doing. What do I get on the mental health side? I wake every day and do I say to myself, good job you didn't have a bad dream last night, or you didn't feel like jumping out of your car at that, punk on the skateboard downtown that jumped in front of you in a crosswalk, and you didn't get out and grab him by the neck. There's no coin for that, And I'm like, and not that I need a coin, but it's that. I can see the colonel's going to pull a coin out and hand me.
I was literally thinking to going to coins for everything.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was like, oh, maybe I'll get the colonel's coin today. That would be all right. Hint. But that was but that was that piece, is in that struggle, and that's the part they don't tell you about. You come home and we did yellow ribbon events in the Guard, and they said, all right, bring your family in, and everybody looks at it and goes, oh great, I got to take my family to a yellow ribbon event to go through this piece. And we talk about all the time, veterans employment, and what do we do, and does this apply, and what are the things that we need to do to serve these vets, and how do we do it? And one of the things I hated most when I came home, people telling me thank you. And I knew that their thank you came from a good place. I know that it came from a good place. But y'all got no idea what you're thanking me for. You got no idea. We've covered it up in the media. You don't know what Colonel Stokes does,
especially
or
if you're
Sergeant
wrapped
Kaufman.
up in guilt.
Yeah.
You're like,
and then the guilt piece lays in, and you're like, don't thank me. Holy cow.
You've immediately just brought to my mind Jimenez, Singh, and some other guys that didn't get to come home and get a thank you. And now I was having a really good freaking day. No, thank you. And I don't, I just politely, you're welcome, and walk off. But we don't get that, And there's no place, people think of the service veteran organizations. Like, oh, why don't you go there? Or why don't you go into post 139 or whatever? And I'm not trying to put them on the spot. But the guys there don't look like me either. You know, every time I've walked into a Legion, I've seen three things: the grill, the bar, and the shuffleboard table. And a couple of those things don't mix well for me. You know, so where do I go? I ended up going, you know, I didn't get thrown out of Omaha. They just told me I couldn't come back. And I was down the street or up the street here in Lincoln on 48th and Stockwell, and I locked myself in my apartment, and a couple of sheriffs and police officers showed up, and I didn't get thrown out there. They just said I had to go away for a while, and I just never came back. And I ended up in Grand Island in a community that, if I go see I call her my whip. She's my well-intentioned psychiatrist. Hi, Doc. When I go see her at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, I might see her Friday at 7 p.m. at Hy-Vee. I might see her at the softball recreation complex with her kids when I go out there. You know? So she kind of has to be nice to me, because if she treats me impersonably, she might see me on the streets, and then it's going down. You know? But I think that's what separates, you know, rural Nebraska from Lincoln and Grand Island. And you know, Lincoln and Omaha, you can talk to me and then you can go hide. But in Grand Island or Hastings, oh, I might find you. And people actually started having an interest in me. And when I walk into places, I can't, and it makes me feel really special, and I'm not. I have a couple of guys in my neighborhood that would tell me I'm not. It makes me feel like you care. You know, that thank you isn't because you feel like you have to. That thank you is because you know that my wife wakes up some nights and has to change the sheets because they're too sweaty. You guys know that she might find, you know, that thank you means that you know that she might find me in the backyard without my shirt on, you know, clearing my house. That thank you means you didn't have to. And then it comes from a place of understanding. I get that. Because now you're not telling me you understand, you're telling me you'd like to. You'd like to just know.
While we're on the line of what's annoying.
Love you.
Oh, good.
What's bothered me, and Rick and I have talked about this a number of times, but what bothers me a little bit, and I think this is a fair argument, is that as the general public sees veterans, there's like three types of veterans. You got the homeless dude with the sign, vet, will work for food down on O Street, that guy. You've got the guy with no legs in his wheelchair that you see on TV and so forth, or maybe downtown. Okay, that's the guy with some limb issues or got blown up, whatever. And then there's this mystical jobless vet, which in Nebraska at 4% unemployment, we don't really have that big of a problem. And so there's kind of those three easy buckets that we put veterans in for you guys, or for somebody over here, general do-gooding public. However, but in the big scheme of things, of vets returning home with a 1.6, whatever number it is, that's this many. There's this many of guys that are taking their kids to soccer practice and have jobs and go to the thing every day and whatever. I mean, we're not in that extreme category that's so easy to label and so easy to give money to. Oh, you know, I can see him at Creek Carrier in the boardroom going, oh gosh, we got this $100 grand. Let's give it to the vets. Yeah, that sounds great, Jim. Let's give it to the vets. How do we do that? Well, let's help them with the jobless vets. Yeah, good idea, Steve. Jobless vets. And they throw all this money at one of these kind of obscure categories. And I don't have an answer, but there's this giant chunk of guys that aren't in that category that can't sleep and have mental issues, divorces, alcohol problems. And that doesn't mean they're raving drunks, but they drink 6 scotches a night, or, you know, whatever. It doesn't have to be extreme. I mean, that's the easy label that is so easy to jump on that bandwagon and say, oh, the guy with no legs, easy. That guy is hero, give him money, scholarships for his kids, take care of this guy, easy. Homeless guy, yeah, we can do that. VA, throw money at him. We can fix that as best we can. But there's really no good, solid answer for that other 1.59 million dudes that are in dudettes that have some pretty big baggage in their lives, but they're still functioning, and they're your neighbor, and they're me and him and all that.
That is all. Well, when the colonel says that's all, there's always more. So they never end it with that is all. Well, and I think that's it, and it's the little things. I mean, for me, I hate riding in the car now with a window cracked. The sound of air rushing through my car drives me absolutely insane, and I don't know why. It never used to, but it does now. And you either got to roll all the windows down or leave them all up, because when the kids like crack one on the back, I'm like, roll up the window. And it's things like that. And I'm fairly well, I don't know. There would be some debate about my functionality on a daily basis, but I'm fairly functional. And I think that's it, is that, not everybody, and Chris says it right, is that, not everybody comes home, and for a variety of reasons, vets don't go in droves to the VA to get signed up for the VA and to seek medical services or mental health services. And one of the reasons is exactly what Chris says, is that I got to give up my flight status if you diagnose me with the VA. The military's going to know. They're going to tell. And now, am I giving up the one thing that I still get a rush from and that I still love to do in exchange for this? Or do you want me to not tell you? And then we'll see what happens there, if you force me not to tell. And it's those kinds of decisions. And we sit around it all the time, is that, and since you brought up employment, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in on we make a big deal, and I respect them very, very much. We make a really big deal in this country around employers who target providing veterans with jobs. You want to go?
Yeah.
Go.
So I've had 36 jobs in 10 years. I can't sleep. Some days I can't eat. Some days I drink I don't anymore. But I used to drink myself to sleep. What happens if I'm at your job and you're a veteran-friendly employer and I don't show up? No call, no show. Ryan, you're a veteran. I'll give you a second shot. What about the second time? Well, Ryan, you're on your last strike. Maybe you go see somebody. So maybe I go walk into the VA, or maybe I go walk into Lutheran Family Services at East program, which is completely confidential. It's a little plug. And maybe I start seeing somebody, but now my job's 9 to 5. Now I have to leave at 1 in the afternoon. And you have, Nick here, who's next to me on the production line at this veteran-friendly job, who goes, how come Ryan gets to leave at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? How come he doesn't have to take sick time? And the bottom line is that your production starts falling, and you can find somebody that can stay there from 9 to 5 that's going to show up every day. And now you're a veteran-friendly employer, but you got to let me go. Because, you're friendly to a veteran when you want to hire them and you want a tax break, but you're not so friendly when you really, really need to keep them aboard and they really need to pay their bills, so they have to do X, Y, and Z, and you may have to arrange your business around their life. I'm blessed enough to work for a couple of people in the past who've done that. But just because you're veteran friendly doesn't mean you're veteran friendly throughout my career. You may be veteran friendly through the hiring process. If Uncle Sam was going to give me a break, I'd be pretty friendly in the beginning too. But how are we tracking whether or not those veterans stay? And in Grand Island, that's something we want to start doing. Is oh, you're veteran friendly. Well, what if G.I. Joe needs to go to the doctor? Then what? Better yet, what if his kid needs to go to the doctor and he hasn't seen him in the last 2 years and he's really starting to bond with him and he wants to take him? Is that going to be okay? No? And Those are the questions we don't ask. And I think that has to do, Chris was talking about, well, where do we give money to? And we know of the country singer on the news channel that sells that one organization that you can donate your money to for guys like me and Chris and Rick. But are we doing it because we feel guilty and that's just the one way that we can cover up our guilt?
Thanks, Ryan. I think we're going to open up for some questions before we do a little bit of a wrap-up. And I take that because Marcia came around the corner with the microphone going like this.
Oh, my back was turned. Sorry.
So I think, are there questions for us?
I'm not supposed to grab it, right? I was wondering how your families felt when you were deployed, how the community helped the families during your deployments.
Okay, I'll start with that one, then if you guys have anything to add. I think the one thing we know, you got a better chance of knowing somebody from North Dakota than you do of knowing somebody who deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. And that's what happened to my family, is that Rick went away to war, and my family heard from people that said, I don't know how you do it. I've never known anybody that's gone away to war. Now, my good friends, the Stokes, happened to be in town, and that was a good thing because they understood. And that was it, is that a community said, friends said, oh, we want to help, but then they didn't know how to help. I mean, it helped me bring dinner over. And there were some people that, stepped up and said, what can we really do? But I think that's it, is that people don't know what to do. And it's that same thing, is that, we don't know what to do, so we don't do anything. And the only thing I would say is, that's the worst thing to do. And, and that's what happens, is that we as a community don't know what it's like because we hide it. Lincoln's not it's not an active duty post. It's not Manhattan, Kansas or Fort Riley, Kansas. When we deploy a unit out of Lincoln, it's 100 soldiers maybe. And so it's 100 families that may or may not all be from Lincoln that go away. And they're just gone.
I know for ours, my wife's in the crowd here, but maybe they called once, like family service or something, maybe? She doesn't even Yeah, we had zero support. My base is in Missouri, and no one even knew except our friends that I was even gone. It's kind of surreal. I mean, there's no huge support system like sometimes is touted, maybe, or if you read it, oh, wow, it sounds like they're really doing a great job of taking care of the deployed families. Well, maybe down in Fort Riley they are, but not when your reservist from Lincoln, Nebraska goes off for a year or 4 months, whatever. So.
And being an active duty soldier, a single active duty soldier, there was nobody at Fort Riley there when I got back. My mom was in Omaha, my brothers and sister were in Omaha, and like these guys said, our immediate folks, I'd get a care box from mom and a couple of letters, and that meant a lot. But what meant more was when I got a letter from a 4-year-old or a five-year-old in West Virginia that I didn't even know, and it's like, yeah, that's why I do this. I don't do this because my next door neighbor is a sweet dude. I actually did,
Yeah, great.
Ryan, I'm really interested of your perspective of, what is it that we could do, when you're looking for that services, that you mentioned that you go and nobody looks like you, or, I've seen that when I've gone to the VA. I see the senior, the very stereotype veterans image that we have. So what is it that you would look for, in a place that you will feel comfortable going to?
I think that the VA has come a really long way, and I know in Omaha and Lincoln they now have peer support, and they have Operation OEF, OIF, OND clinics specific, and when you go through eligibility, you don't go to primary care, you go to that clinic, and you see nothing but guys like you in that clinic. Having a peer support specialist there tells me that you're not putting me in a box. You want to know from me what it is that I need. And unfortunately, the way that mental health billing is set up, I sometimes need to have a couple of boxes checked before I can get anything else, and that's hard. And I think that the system is set up maybe to propagate the system and not the consumer. Does that make sense? And sometimes we get lost then. You know, sometimes if I'm homeless and if I'm hungry but I don't have a diagnosis yet, now I need a diagnosis so your community support worker can go help me. But I can't get the diagnosis. You know, I got stigma. I wear, you know, my boss is in the crowd and he loved it when I said this. I wear a uniform that stood for everything that's right. How can anything be wrong? How can anything be wrong? And I'm homeless and I still don't know that something's wrong. I think having somebody at the reception, at eligibility, as the VA, you know, at eligibility, who looks like me, would help. Or in the nonprofit or medical world, or even for-profit medical world, a peer support person with the receptionist. You know, let me walk you back there so you can go talk to somebody. Now I'm not alone.
Just stand up.
Well, I'm curious too as to what kind of support systems there are for those family members who are trying to help those who come back with the PTSD, the alcoholism, the homelessness, those kinds of things. You know, sometimes the wife or that family can get some support system, but then they go away, and then the rest of the family is left and trying to figure out how do you really help this really critical needs of this family member.
You know, I think I've done a lot of study on this, thinking about this, and it's really a lot like mental illness, dealing with somebody who suffers from serious depression and how the family deals with it. And really, I think that kind of a 12-step deal, like an Al-Anon for the folks around the person, kind of idea would help. And then even, we've talked about this, almost making it into like the thing that if you're mental health providers, which a lot of you guys are, it's just the 12-step deal, but just instead of alcohol, meth, fill in the blank problem, it's coming back from war and how to deal with that for both the vet and the folks that surround the vet.
That's good.
Now, though, is there anything now in Lincoln, Nebraska that does that?
There's the there's Lutheran Family Services at Ease. Art Ortiz is awesome. There's also the Vet Center. My wife went there in Omaha, got super freaking healthy, super quick, and I did not like that. And we actually separated for a while. But you know, they helped her draw a line in the sand.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, we had a conference not that long ago called No Wrong Door, where we brought case managers together to talk about this specific issue, and that was, there's a lot of services out there. Sometimes what we forget is we forget to ask the question of those who come in the door at a nonprofit agency or at someplace in town, whether they are a veteran. And we don't know that, and they may be receiving services in this community that we don't even identify. I mean, it's the same thing when we talk about, you know, suicide rates among veterans. It's up to a coroner to make the determination or to say this person was a veteran. We can't track those numbers. And unless we start going, what are the services that we're currently providing that veterans are accessing, it's really hard to figure out what they're accessing and then how to open them up to more family members and how to get them in the door. Because there isn't a wrong door. If you do it right, no matter how you enter the system, they're going to ask you to go to the VA and register so that we can track, so that you can be tracked. They got to track us all the time. And, you know, and then they can provide the service. But it's tough. There's resources that are out there, and well-meaning people, I think sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And when we don't know to ask the question, then we never get an answer. And that's what happens.
I think there are plenty of services there. I think a big problem is we're a bunch of knuckleheads as veterans because we were in this zero tolerance environment. We're bad. We can do this. We can handle this. I can carry this rucksack up the hill and blow everybody away. I'm King Kong, G.I. Joe.
Audie Murphy.
Audie Murphy. So we the first step in getting help is, right, admitting you have a problem, right? So we have a hard time admitting we have a problem and going in and getting the help that's there. And that's a big problem.
Sure. The VA system has obviously been in the news quite a bit lately about access problems, and as a result of that, as I'm sure you're aware, there's legislation winding through Congress that might allow veterans the choice of using the private system, private hospitals, private doctors. This hasn't been approved yet, just, I guess, suggested legislation right now. My question is, do you all support that? Giving veterans a choice of the private system, and do you think that would be helpful or not so helpful?
The opinion given here by this veteran of this veteran is this veteran's and should not be blanketed for all veterans. The VA is very conservative, and it has to be. It's your money. It's your money. We need to make sure that we have every viable option, Ryan, with your back problem before we cut you open and give you a $10,000 surgery. That being said, I still need to get into the system for them to fee-base it out. So we still have 1.6 million veterans coming home that are going to need to file into the clinic to register, then still see primary care to see if they need services. Because eligibility decides whether or not, number one, whether or not I make enough money to be charged a copay, and number two, when I'm going to get that appointment. And even then, there's a whole nother side of that, which is the Veterans Benefit Administration, which decides whether or not, on a whole nother level, if my injury is connected to service or if my need is connected to service. And right now, Nebraska is seeing claims from Oakland and El Paso, Texas, because we're so good at getting those off the books, and now we're 6 months to a year behind on those claims. So, it's an imperfect world, but if the reason I go to the VA for what some people call the PTSD, that's another joke.
I got it.
Thanks. Is because they see it all the time. Now, if I go to my general practitioner, out in the community, hey man, I can't sleep, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Well, how many drinks do you have a night? Such and such. And I don't want to tell him I'm a veteran. He's going to tell me, I'll take a few of these, maybe go get some Tylenol PM, and you're good. And we never get to the root of the problem. I think the VA has done a very good job in my community, of isolating what is truly going on with me.
Yeah, and I think, quick on it, I think what you're seeing is a generational shift in how we all view the VA. And I'm probably going to get a phone call or something Community Health Endowment's going to get because I'm saying this. Because I'm open to that kind of a concept, is because to me, God bless them, but I don't need a brick and mortar VA hospital standing out on 70th and O Street. I mean, what I need is service when I need it. And if that means, giving me a Medicare card so that I can go to a private provider, and where it really applies to me, the people that I worry about is my guy in Thedford who can't get to the VA for help, but he could sure as heck go to the county hospital and get help if you gave him a way to get the hospital reimbursed for that service. And I think that's one of the big obstacles that we have, because telling him, sorry, you got to get on a bus and go to Denver if you want to get treatment, or to Cheyenne, or come back here to Omaha, right, for your sore throat, isn't going to work. And I think that that's part of that shift and change in how we're viewing these things, is we've got to change with understanding where veterans are and meeting them where they're at and where they're needing service, instead of saying, Omaha VA is the only place you can go to see a neurologist, and you're going to wait 6 months to get an appointment to get in and see that neurologist. All right, well, I'm going to sit around and wait 6 months for a neurology appointment. Really? I mean, come on.
I was in a car accident in December, separated my AC joint. They called me and they said, you know, your x-rays look real bad. We need you to go to Omaha next week. Okay. I went there, and we're literally doing our New Year's Eve shopping, and I'm waiting for my appointment time, and I get a phone call, Ryan, your appointment's been canceled. It's really not that necessary. We got you in March. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is a car accident. Like, this isn't a service-connected injury. I'll just go out in the community. And I went in the community, and it was fixed within, 2 months and 4 visits. Remember, 1.6 million people filing into 300 buildings in this country.
I think we'll take one more question and then we'll wrap up, if there is one. Is there one more?
This is more for Chris and Rick, since I've been talking with Ryan. How do you guys stay focused in everything from day to day? Because I've been talking with Ryan, like, so my past 40 days have been like rock bottom, but how do you guys just stay focused, on what you need to do to stay where you are right now?
I keep busy. I work hard, and I spend my energy trying to, I don't know how to explain it. I work hard doing things. Some productive, some not. But I just try to keep engaged and working towards some cause, whatever it might be. That's it. That's all I got.
Well, I think it's a good question because I do the opposite. Because for me, it's about being aware when I'm entering into kind of those feelings and stopping and allowing it to come and recognizing it and then going with it for a little bit and knowing that I'm safe in feeling what I'm feeling and it's okay and that there's nothing wrong with me for feeling anxious or for feeling depressed in that moment or whatever it is, and to be aware of it. And we've gotten really good. The Army, only 12 years too late, has invested in this whole idea of resiliency and to teach soldiers how to be resilient. Well, yeah, we did it after 1.6 million of them went to war. Now we're going to teach the next generation how to be resilient. But it's good stuff, and it's positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania is where they've based it on. And for me, it's been actually life-changing to be able to stop myself and allow myself to feel those things. I don't just what's that quote? Don't just do something, stand there. And for me, that was the hardest thing, is not to do something and to just stand there for a minute and let it happen a little bit in a safe way and then go, see, look at that. I'm going to be all right. I just made it through that moment right there, and I sure as heck can make it through the next one. And that's how I do it. And I read a lot of people that inspire me. If you jumped on my Facebook, you'd wonder about Ram Dass quotes and all kinds of stuff right now. But, it's what I do, is that I find peace in being self-aware. And that's what I work towards every single day. And I think it's just different ways.
Do exactly what he said and not what I said.
Party word of advice. Well, I am going to say thank you. And I hope you know that it's heartfelt, not only from me, but I think all of us. And a lot of those thanks, I think, come from the fact that you did it. We didn't. And for that, we have to give thanks because you did sacrifice a good portion of your life and home life, and in some cases your health, to make a choice that we didn't make. So we do thank you, and I think all of you will join me in thanking them.